We are determined to have a nation that is united, a nation that is balanced, a nation that is equitable. Usawa ni kitu ya maana sana. Najua na tunawaomba msamaha wale wanapandwa na hasira, wengine wanapandwa na hamaki, kwa sababu eti tumetangaza ya kwamba tutajenga barabara kilomita 750 kuunganisha Northern Kenya as a second transport corridor in Kenya. Ama kwa sababu tumetangaza ya kwamba tutaondoa mambo ya vetting. Mutatusamehe wale mnakasirika, wale mnapandwa na hamaki. Usawa ni mambo iko ndani ya katiba. Kuwaeleza wananchi ni mambo iko ndani ya katiba. It is not our fault. We are just discharging what the Constitution of Kenya mandates and commands us to do. And that is how we are going to go forward.
Ukabila na fujo zina shida nyingi. Jana kwa niaba ya serikali ya Kenya nilitoa taarifa kwamba wenzetu ambako wako katika taifa la DRC kama Wakenya wakifanya biashara, mambo ni hatari kwa sababu ya ukabila, kwa sababu ya fujo. Kuna sehemu katika taifa hilo ukipatikana unaongea Kiswahili na huongei lugha ile nyingine, unachapwa, hata unaweza kuuawa. Hata tumehamisha ubalozi wetu katika hiyo taifa kwa sababu ya mambo ya kikabila na fujo. Kwa hivyo jukumu letu tuungane, tuwe kitu kimoja.
Tunataka nyinyi wabunge tusikie mkiongea. Tunataka muongee mambo ya maji. Tunataka muongee mambo ya barabara. Hapana kuweka watu kwa mabasi kwenda kuhongwa huko Karen. Mkuje mfanyie watu kazi. Tunataka kusikia mkiongea pale bunge. Na niambie nyinyi wabunge, ati mnatuambia tusikuje hapa Igembe North, ati mtatupangia vijana. Hamujui sisi mlituona usiku. Mlituona usiku. We don't need permission from a member of parliament to visit any part of Meru or this country. Sisi ni wa Kenya. Na pia sisi tuko na wafuasi. Rigathi Gachagua ako na wafuasi wamezidi mamilioni na mamilioni. Unajua watu walikuwa wanakifikiria ati wakinifukuza nitaenda peke yangu. Nilitoka na watu yo? Mumetoka UDA hamjatoka? Wangapi wametoka UDA? Wangapi wametoka UDA? Bas. Sasa mimi niliambiwa na wazee na watu ya kanisa, mtoto wetu tunakupenda lakini ulitukosea. Ulitupeleka harusi na gari ya mtu mwingine. Tukufika kwa mto tukaambiwa tushuke. Tafadhali in future hii mlima haitaenda harusi na gari ya mtu mwingine. Na kwa hivyo tumeunda chama yetu ya Mlima Kenya na Wakenya wengine. Na ni gari mpya na iko tayari. Na injini na mwaga maji kwa vile iko sawa. Na driver ni Rigiji mwenyewe. Na hiyo gari nitaitangaza mwezi ya 5. Tunataka nyote mtoke kwa UDA muingie kwa gari ya Mlima Kenya. Mtaingia? Nimoko igera? Nimoko igera? Kwa sababu sisi hatuwezi bebwa kama fala. Hao watu wametutumia vibaya. Wametuhangaisha na uongo, hakuna kazi inaendelea. Alafu wanakuja kufukuza watoto wetu kazini. Sasa sisi tutakuwa na gari yetu na tutakuwa na zaidi ya wabunge 120 katika bunge ambayo itakuja. Na hiyo gari ndio ya pekee ya area hii. Rais ataunda chama zingine, atatengeneza mahwilbaro ingine nyekundu, tutamwambia hiyo ni ya rais. Atatengeneza wheelbarrow ingine ya blue, tunamwambia hiyo ni ya rais. Hata atajaribu kusimamisha watu wengine urais wagawe kula yetu. Hao watu yote tutamwambia wale wametumwa na yeye. Sisi tunamjua, tunamuelewa. Tunamuelewa sana. alikuwa anajaribu kugawa at Mount Kenya East na Mount Kenya West. Wameru mtakubali? Sisi hapana wajinga. Ati alikuwa anasema Wameru na Waembu na Watharaka mjitenge. Ati Wakikuyu pande ile. Si hiyo ni njia ya kutumaliza? Sisi hapana wajinga. Sisi ni watu werevu. Siku tulikubali kugawanywa wakati ya Kibaki na Matiba. Tulipotea hatukupotea. Hatuwezi rudia hiyo makosa. Sisi tutakaa kama one united mountain na hakuna mtu ambaye atagawa sisi. Kwa sababu tukikubali kugawanywa tutakuwa tumepotea. Kwa hivyo kwa chama yetu wale MCAs wote nimeona hapa muingie. Tutakuwa na free and fair nomination. Si ndio? Huyu Dr. Laibuni na wengine waingie pia kwa chama. Alafu nyinyi wenyewe mtanipatia mtu moja. Yule ambaye tutakuja kupigia kampeni. Siko namna hiyo? Hata Maoka Maore nimwambia ikia kwa gari yetu. Pana kama msituni, si ndio? Kwa sababu sasa lazima tujipange vizuri.
Welcome to Fireside, the home of politics, policy, and polity. Good evening, Noordean. How are you doing?
I am doing well.
You seem to be very happy. Is it that you've had Red Bull or coffee?
Coffee.
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Habari yako?
Salama kama jana. Jana nilikuwa salama, leo niko salama na naendelea kukuwa salama.
Your white shirt has created controversies. How old is that shirt?
This shirt is 9 years old. Yes.
So that shirt has not been acquired in the recent past.
And let us not talk about the price. Let's just talk about.
Okay, Noordean.
Yes.
You know you're highly regarded as an upcoming lawyer. What are your major highlights of the week before we go into the meat of the conversation?
Highlights of the week. People are still healing from the shocks of AU. But wacha waongee itawatoka. And we're seeing that the president has accepted the meme that was the road from Isiolo to Mandera. He's become also a content creator. He has done his own content, which is okay.
Okay.
And
is he being paid for generating that content or creating content?
Oh, he should tell us. He should tell us, because I've realized when they call him Kasongo, he accepts it, creates his own content. I think that's a way of him accepting, which is okay. I've also seen people being called to Karen, leaders from Meru who are called to Karen, and they were told to tell the government what they want. Now I forgot. I expected these people signed charters during campaigns, these counties and constituencies. What happened to that manifesto? I keep asking you the same thing. Did that manifesto get lost or something? Because why are you still asking people what they need and what they want 2-3 years into your administration? So it's more or less the Kenya Kwanza kind of way of doing things. Topsy-turvy, upside down. Nothing has changed. It's usual.
Kevin Owidi, did Kenya Kwanza lose their manifestos? Their county charters?
Why are we asking that kind of question?
Well, Udina said that he's seen... you remember when when President Ruto was deputy president, there used to be delegations upon delegations visiting his official current residence. And then he also did the countrywide tours. He went to every county where they signed county charters. And Udinia, who is a lawyer, we expect that he's calling a spade, has said that we are seeing a return of the same thing. But this time round, the deputy president is asking those people, what do you want? So his question is, what are the issues captured in the county charters? Or now we are celebrating a new beginning?
No, I just think we are poking our nose into the internal affairs of the UDA party.
Noordean, is that what you're doing?
Because
I believe UDA is a public public party. It's paid by taxpayers' money, so that party is not owned by anyone.
So you have a right to poke your nose? I'm
not poking my nose. I'm just asking questions, because again, why would you go around, sign charters with people, and then come and ask them, what do you want? As in, what is that? Incompetence. according to me. If you'd work for me, I give you deliverables. Today, you come tomorrow, ask me again, what am I supposed to do? You should be out of the door. It's as simple as that.
You know, circumstances change throughout the country. What was needed 1 year ago, it may not be what the community needs today. What they needed 3 years ago may not be exactly what they need today. Things may have changed. But when the deputy president calls people to his residence, he wants to meet them sometimes as a government delegation, sometimes as a party delegation, sometimes just his clansmen privately. So we do not have to worry very much who he meets. Those people he meets needs to worry. Why does the DP want us? And then he has the agenda, he talks to them. Because also remember, politics is a continuous thing, and nobody prevents a politician from meeting his political subjects into his residence, his office, or in the field out there. He can meet them at any given time, and nothing stops him from playing politics.
Is it not curious that it comes from Mount Kenya, and that the delegations you've seen so far, all of them are from Mount Kenya? So Mura would be wondering then, Anyango, Halima, would they not be wondering when they're going to be invited?
You know, I have explained to you that when you have the person of the deputy president, he is a member of cabinet, a member of the executive. That aside, he's also a politician and a member and a deputy party leader of UDA. Also, he's a father and a mother and a member of his clan. There are times he just meets his friends and relatives as clansmen. There are times he meets his party members as a politician. There are times he meets people as a government official. With that, he's the deputy president of the whole Republic of Kenya. And if he's meeting people on his capacity as the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya, he will meet people from Northeastern the same way he will meet those from Voi, the same way he'll meet those from Migori, and in the same way he'll meet those from Busia. That he can do and he should do and will always do. But because politics is largely local, maybe in his next move, he may want to meet his people of the Mount Kenya East and talk to them on issues affecting them, because politics is largely local. If there is a reason for him to meet the people of Homa Bay for something that he believes it's only him that can deliver to them, then he will call the people of Homa Bay to his residence or his office or wherever else he finds convenient to meet them. And I don't think we should be worried about him doing that. We saw his predecessor was even worse, because in his meetings, in his travels, everything was and revolved around Mount Kenya. So I think the DP currently has done nothing wrong. He's doing what is expected of him.
As you wait for your cup of coffee, what has been your highlight of the week?
It has been a very beautiful week, but there are certain things we need to open up about and speak about it. But today, the end of this week, I listened to the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, speaking in Meru.
The Deputy President?
Yeah, sorry, the former Deputy President, I'm sorry. The former Deputy President was warning the President that if the Chief Justice, Martha Koome, who apparently is from Meru, is impeached, then he should not step in Meru. That is how far the arrogance can go to. And that is not acceptable anywhere. It means at any given time, the president, nor the parliament, nor Judicial Service Commission, nor any other organ will not have the power to impeach somebody who has not been sanctioned for impeachment by Rigathi Gachagua, to punish anybody who has not been sanctioned for punishment by Rigathi Gachagua and what he will now believe and he believes is the large community. If Kenyans don't take care today, and the people who probably have the key to it now are the larger communities, especially the Luo, if they don't come in the way of Rigathi Gachagua, in the next elections and subsequent ones thereafter, he will be the one to determine who becomes the president of the Republic of Kenya. If what he's trying to do and is talking about, he succeeds in it. Because, you see, Rigathi Gachagua was lifted from being a first-time MP into deputy. With that newfound power and influence, he decided to want to control the president of the Republic of Kenya. And when that could not happen, and the people thought he was going overboard, and through their representatives elected in the assemblies, impeached him, he now wants to gag the president from speaking, gag the president from even visiting places, and not only the president, because I've heard his warnings even to his own people, that those who do not toe his line would not even see the inside of parliament, Senate, nor National Assembly. And I think he can actually succeed if he's not stopped now. And I think some of the statements he makes are largely criminal. To come and tell a sitting president elected by the people and sworn into office by the Chief Justice that he cannot visit some part of Kenya if a legal organ like the JSC impeaches a Chief Justice. Was that what he was going to say if the Chief Justice was coming from Turkana? Is that what he would have said if the Chief Justice was coming from Kakamega? So I think Rigathi Gachagua is being led to commit crimes and continue with it because we are trying to be politically correct with his people. I think people need to be told the truth. Otherwise, if we don't do that, because I hear they want to talk to each and every political formation so that Rigathi Gachagua becomes his leader and determines who becomes Kenya's president next. The next time, he will be the one to determine who becomes the president, whether it's from his community or from another community, and whoever will come will be as stooge that if it threatens that we will take you the same route we took President William Ruto, then they will call down and come back and say, sir, we will do as you wish. So this is something that must be stopped now, not tomorrow.
Actually, that statement by the former deputy president, if accurate, it reminds one of the late Peter Abenga Okondo. You remember he issued a warning and he told the late Bishop Alexander Kipsang Muge, that you don't dare think of stepping in Busia. I'm sure you would remember, that statement here. Although I'm not going to challenge Noordean, probably he's read it in history books. But you see, those are the kind of unacceptable statements that we must not entertain. And also, Rigathi Gachagua served as a deputy president, so he probably understands that the presidency is a symbol of national unity. And I doubt whether he's got capacity to stop, leave alone President Ruto, whether he's got capacity to stop anybody in Kenya, or indeed anybody in this world who comes to visit the territory of Kenya from visiting wherever they want. But you say that he has to be stopped. What do you mean?
He has to be stopped. First of all, whatever he said was not only arrogance. It was incitement to the people. Because what he was saying, he was telling the people of Meru, if your daughter goes home during the reign of President William Ruto, ensure that President William Ruto doesn't visit Meru. How would they do that? Heckle him, stone him, or do what?
Okay, so Kevin, let me stop there. Was Chief Justice Kome, did she get her position on meritocracy or on account that she's Meru?
For me, the law was followed for her to get that position. Pole. And that same law that was followed to put her on that seat is the same one that would be followed in case she would have to be impeached from that office. That is the law. So for somebody to come and tell the president, as if the president is the whole of JSC, I don't understand. I think it is utmost disrespect for Rigathi Gachagua to keep on addressing the president on every issue, even those which are supposed to be handled by independent commissions and organizations.
But before Noordean comes in, don't you think that he's been a very clever politician? Because we know politics in Kenya is mobilized around ethnic kingdoms. So he wants to be the ethnic chief. And for him to mobilize the people, to make them emotional, to make them irrational, he has to appeal to their selfish interests. You remember the concept of the Stockholm Syndrome?
He's not a clever politician. He's simply a cheeky politician. It is being very cheeky. And I don't even know where there is a body that is supposed to deal with cohesion and integration in this country. And I don't know whether they are listening to that, because that is utmost incitement against the person of the President of the Republic of Kenya.
Noordean, would you say that is incitement?
You see, first and foremost, if you are to take that to court, it will fail. That in itself, the defense is it was a political statement. Mm-hmm. It was made in a political way, all right? And as you rightfully say, he knows what he's doing, because at the end of the day, there are those conversations around the removal of judges from the Supreme Court. I, as an advocate, I'll tell you, yes, the judiciary has issues. Yes, there are issues of corruption. That is true, and everybody knows that. Even the same CJ has admitted that there is corruption in the judiciary. But is it only exclusive to the judiciary? The executive has issues, the legislature has issues. So we do understand the issue around cleaning up the judiciary. That is right. But at the same time, we need to be honest with one another and understand that in as much as that is the case, there are also political schemes around that as well. All right? So we cannot, one, destabilize the judiciary for political goals, because that also is there. So the issue of if there are concerns, if there are issues, you just see it on X. People say, oh, X amount of money was paid to X amount of person. Prove that, all right? Because if you just put it on social media, and then it becomes like a smear campaign, all right? So rightfully what we say is, bring it up. It will be, before the JSC, a tribunal will be formed. If they cannot prove that they didn't receive the bribe, or if they did, then the outcome will be known. So I believe that's what we need to do. But Gachagua, what he's doing, remember, he's still trying to be the quote-unquote kingpin of a political base. And I hate that word, because we are not subjects to anyone. You know, I hate that word. So
you hate kingpin?
I hate that.
Or you hate to be a subject?
No, I'm not. I can never be a subject. Okay. My mind would never allow me to do that. So I hate that route. But so he's trying to form that quote-unquote kingdom of his, all right? The dynasty they were fighting back then when they were campaigning. So that is what he's trying to do. And as he says, it's cheeky, but it's a political statement. You have to realize that William Ruto, when he was deputy president, he did things that Uhuru never liked. So Gachagua is repaying the same double. Actually, Gachagua is a better version of him as a deputy. Because now, the things he couldn't say and he would send people to say, this one he's saying. The schemes he would have where he'd have members of parliament break away from the main party and work with you. It's the same thing Gachagua is doing. So Gachagua is just paying him in kind. He has mastered him and he's repeating the same things. That is why, instead of meeting people in Karen, since he was impeached, he missed them in Wamunyoro. Karen was very famous when the president was a DP. Now Wamunyoro is very famous. Today we were seeing people were telling him, Tunta kuja Wamunyoro. It has become very famous, all right? So it's more or less, it's a political statement, political gimmicks, and you heard what he said, that they will punish anyone that comes from their tribe who has sold their people. All right? So it's bound towards 2027. And as you rightfully said, he cannot stop anyone. Even you or I going to Meru. He can't even stop, let alone the president. He can't stop any of us. And if tomorrow the president would want to go to Meru, he would go. But I just believe he's creating a base and creating tension around the issue of Martha Koome, one. Number two, trying to solidify himself as the protector and shield and guard for the mountain.
Have you been to Wamunyoro?
No, I've never been there. I've been to Nyeri, but I've not been to Wamunyoro.
I mean, what if you get invited? Would you?
What would be the invitation around? That's the question.
I mean, he wants to meet young lawyers.
You see, the discussion is quite, for what reason? You see, I just can't wake up and go somewhere.
As a subject?
It can never be me. You know, if I was looking to go somewhere as a subject, I'd go to State House, but I still can't go there. If I wanted to go there, I'd go there even tomorrow. Okay. But I do not want that. You get? There's nothing to gain from that. You see, my ideals and this regime's ideals are polar opposites. So that discussion will be pegged on no gain on my end, because I will have wasted means I can never recover in my life.
I mean, don't you think that is an extreme position? Because there's the idea of ideas cross-pollination, that when you meet people in a group, when you're having a drink, probably you don't drink, but maybe when you're having a coffee, you can discuss and you get good ideas which can move the nation forward. There's even a saying in Swahili that when you're summoned for a meeting, you don't say no to the meeting, but you can say no to the contents of the meeting.
Here's the thing, and we have to be honest with one another. There are places you can go and there are places you can't go because it's a waste of time. If I'm going somewhere to come up with ideas, why would I go to someone who advises you on how to advise him? What do I gain from that meeting? If I go to someone who's all-knowing, so what is the point of that meeting? If someone would want my input on something and would take up my opinion, of course. But if someone I know is hell-bent on that, they are right. And by the way, I don't have a PhD, so how will I advise him? Let's be real, man. So at the end of the day, those are just facts, you know. So what am I going to do in that meeting? You know, I'm not yet there.
Have you registered for a PhD so that you have capacity to give advice?
Maybe I should, because I haven't yet, you know. So why should I go and waste my time there, you know?
Kevin, you don't have a PhD, but
let me tell you about this PhD issue. These are narratives that are being spun by partisan media. Even when the president says certain things, the context in which he says them are totally turned inside out and upside down to depict him as really a bad man. You know, Noordean has said that his ideals cannot go with the one of the current government. And I do agree with him, but I also know those ideals, if the ones I imagine he holds are the same one he's been holding, I wonder why he did not say the same of the past regimes. The things President William Ruto do in this country are definitely better than what was done during Uhuru and what was done during Kibaki. Some of the things President William Ruto tolerates today, you would not do during those times. I know a time has come when people are largely woke, but nevertheless, we must also treat President William Ruto in such a way, knowing that even if he has to change slowly, but he has drastically changed. Like those statements that Rigathi was making, those ones you made in the past, he would now be making statements at the CID headquarters. He would be doing so. But the Ruto is largely a very patient man. And I don't know why people are not reading Rigathi Gachagua as he is. This is a man who is largely very jealous. He's even jealous of President William Ruto knowing the roads in his backwards were Munyoro than he does. It is not that it is wrong for President William Ruto to know the roads there. It is that he was jealous that the president knew those roads and he did not know. This guy is a guy who is suffering from acute narcissistic personality disorder. A person who does not believe anybody should know better than him. A person who doesn't believe anybody should lead him. A person who believes in his own personal supremacy. And this is what he's trying to spread. And Kenyans are not seeing this because he's busy showing them the bigger man up there. You know, when we were young, there's a game that we used to play. Your friend would come and tell you, look up at that bird. And then he would hit your throat. What that thing was teaching us, while you are busy aiming high there, you are exposing your throat. While you are busy focusing up in the air, you are exposing your throat. Today, the people of Mount Kenya have been bombarded that are all focusing on President William Ruto, while somebody is plotting to capture them down here and use them as his personal tools for political games. They better go back and look back and see what is happening down here as we are being pointed to at President William Ruto. They are even forgetting the performance of their own counties. They are all looking at President William Ruto. I think Kenyans, the mountain included, needs to go back and re-examine themselves and re-examine their politicians and re-examine what they are being told to believe about the current regime. We have had President William Ruto in this country as an adult for in excess of 30 years, and we know him. So these things we are being told today, we are now believing is about. How come in all these many years, we never saw this badness we are being told about today? In fact, to an extent that we are being told of somebody called Matiang'i, a person we have known for hardly 12 years, that is now a better choice. We are being told about Rigiji, who came into limelight just 10, 12 years ago, and that is now a better person. We have not studied this man.
But you raised the fundamental issue that there are statements being made today that would have not been made in prior administrations. And you said it's because of President Ruto's persona. Are we talking about President Ruto's persona, or we are saying these are freedoms enshrined in the 2010 Constitution?
Freedoms have limits. Freedoms have limits. That is why we have jails. We cannot just free you to steal from others. We can not just free you to slander others. We cannot just free you to incite Kenyans against their own elected president. We can't have that kind of freedom. Freedom has to be limited to what does not injure others. Freedom must be limited to what does not destroy the cohesiveness of this country. But now when you reach a level that you even tell some people that should not allow the president in their backyard, are you trying to secede? Are you trying to take part of Kenya to be your own kingdom?
Now,
that must not be accepted now or forever.
Now, talking about freedoms, you recall about 4 years ago when Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in the US presidential elections.
Yes.
Donald Trump refused to attend the elections. He refused to hand over.
Yes.
And during the last presidential elections, there was a bit of commotion that then former President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta was actually uncomfortable handing over to the president-elect, then William Samoei Ruto, that even public servants of rank who were said to have wanted to sabotage the entire process. Now, the Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary has come up with a piece of legislation which has been presented to the National Assembly. It referred to as the Assumption of the Office of the President and Transition of Executive Authority Bill, which is going to be subject to, through the normal legal process. Noordean, if you may offer direction, not because of anything, but because you are a lawyer with a political mind. When you go through this proposed piece of legislation, what comes to you? What jumps out?
Well, first and foremost, it's a repeal of the Assumption of Office of the President's Act. And I think it's okay what they're doing. I don't have a problem with it. As Cicero would say, the closer the collapse of an empire, the crazier the laws. So I do believe in them preparing this quote-unquote bill that is yet to become an act. It will apply on them as well. And I hope and pray it applies to them in 2027. I hope they're making a bill and a law for themselves. So it is timely, it's okay, because those fears, there are those who are saying that if a president doesn't appear, the elect can't take office. As if you read this bill, it says it will still continue. The only difference is that the constitution and sword that's supposed to be passed by the president won't be passed. And also the other scenario where those two things can't be passed is when the sitting president retains the seat. So which is okay. I do believe that in democratic space, if you lose, it shows magnanimity. Come, hand over. If you don't want to hand over, it's also okay. The country must move on, whether you're in fields or not. But I don't have a problem with this bill. I just think that I've seen the penalties. That is 10 million and 7 years in imprisonment, or both. Some would say it's high. I would want to understand the reason behind that, because they talk about every ministry should give reports by July of the election year. So I think
90 days before the election.
So I think the reason is that someone might try to sabotage a government or something. I don't understand why you'd see things that way. But if that happens, then the penalty, it's quite excessive, but I think it's more or less a deterrence.
But remember, we were told during the last presidential election that the government printer was reluctant to go ahead and do his assignment. That there may be somebody who can crawl from the woodwork, wants to frustrate IBC from making the pronouncements. So are you suggesting that the penalty is light or heavy or is not commensurate? Because if somebody wants to threaten a peaceful handover of power, in my view, 10 million is probably even not sufficient.
My only question is that the offenses that are there, they're different. If someone hasn't gazetted or if someone has not brought a report, so the same penalty will arise. If my report is late, so that means 7 years or 10 million. You see, it needs to be commensurate. It means, that I think the 10 million in 7 years is more or less someone who's trying to prevent the assumption from taking place, which no one can ever prevent because the constitution is expressed on that. So I do believe that, yes, it has, the bill has timely issues. Like, for example, no government official can enter into agreements days to an election or after an election, because the telecom issue that arose after this government took office, So I think those binding agreements that your tenure is over and the minister is still engaging in bilateral agreements with other countries without the approval they want the approval to come from Treasury. That's what they're saying. But I believe the same approval should come from National Assembly. But by then, there's no National Assembly. So hence, there's no for Treasury, which works for me. So such things are okay. It's just that I believe we need to, the penalty is okay. I don't have a problem with it. It's just, it might be challenged because offenses are different. I might slack on my job and failed to hand over a report, as I'm saying, and maybe hand over it later, does that mean the same penalty arises? That is different from someone who actively sabotages the assumption of office. I don't have a problem with the bill. It's okay. I'm sure it's going to pass. They have the numbers at the end of the day. Let them pass it. My only prayer and hope is that it works on them in the next election. That's all.
Yeah. Also, the bill proposes for the first time something they're referring to as a transition center.
Yes.
At a place to be appointed where all these documents are going to be deposited. And I was doing a basic research, and this kind of legislation does not exist anywhere in the world. I mean, the only other standing legislation is the one of the US, but it doesn't have a transition center where all this information is deposited so that the president-elect or the incoming president actually understands what is happening within the nation.
You know, it strikes me of Gachagua. Tuliingia tukapata hakuna kitu. Hata panya hakuna. It's like we want a center where we put everything. You get, it's funny, but I guess because we have historical issues as a country. So you find someone feels that this government is leaving office and they do not want to give us information or data as to what they did. So hence the reason why they want a center. I don't know what that center will carry. If it's the reports are going to be there by July.
No, the center is where you deposit the information.
What information?
And where the president-elect and the deputy president-elect will be working from as they wait to be sworn into office.
You see, that's duplicity of work, because if this ministerial and state departments reports already in by July, and they said, I think it's head of public service will have all these reports. So that means at the end of the day, everything is there. So what is the role of this other center?
So say that you run for office and you've won, you're the president-elect.
Yeah.
As you wait to be sworn into office, where do you want to be reading these reports from? From your bedroom?
No, you have an office, don't you?
Which office?
If you're a president, you're in State House, of course.
No, but you have not assumed office, yes.
No, here's the thing.
You are president-elect.
Here's the thing. Whether you're ready today or tomorrow, once you're sworn in, of course. But you know, they also say that you need to have information. Immediately,
as a president-elect.
Immediately you're president-elect.
Yeah.
Now that means you can walk into any office, man. You can always, because if you're receiving security briefs, as they say in this bill, it's as easy as calling the head of public service, because he or she is supposed to receive the same documents.
And then you go meet at Java?
No. So you have an office, of course.
Which office?
The one that I have.
Your private office?
Yes. Pending my assumption, because we do not have an office of a president-elect, and we can't fund that. So pending that.
Why are you thinking like a shepherd?
No, I'm not thinking like a shepherd. I'm just being realistic. Because when we say we open a center to do what? Okay, let me ask you. So that center will only work once in every 5 years.
Yeah, at KCC.
And then open a loophole for corruption for funding of that center.
Now, you've again raised a very fundamental issue. That committee is required again to prepare reports about the transition, which will be tabled at the National Assembly, where the people's representative will interrogate. But going to Kevin, what do you make of this requirement that the cabinet secretaries, as well as principal secretaries, must come up with very elaborate reports? You remember last time the head of the National Treasury was accused of cutting deals, while in fact you've got a president-elect, and he was doing this thing. There was that transition period, and people claimed that he escaped with murder.
There are two things you need to understand, and actually we should be discussing more or less the need for this new legislation rather than the technical details. You remember when there was transition from President Mwai Kibaki to Uhuru Kenyatta. At that point in time, the president and his community, the president and his constituency were both for the incoming new president. And that made life very easy. When we are faced with a situation like the one President William Ruto was faced with, if the president has also had his people on his candidate, the story would have been completely very different. And that is the fear that has made it necessary that now we need to have a legislation in which all these ministers have to be seen to be loyal to the incoming. When President Uhuru was about to get elected, I remember all major government projects were frozen. And it was easy to do that because the outgoing president and the incoming president were in tandem and in agreement. I remember this expressway was supposed to have been built during the Quebec regime. And all the process of doing it was frozen until the new regime of President Uhuru Kenyatta came in. That was easy. But in the event that the incoming president is not one that is favored by the outgoing president, then the story can be very difficult. You would not even freeze things that would ordinarily detriment the Kenyan taxpayers' resources. This one, again, was a very complicated scenario. Even though President Uhuru Kenyatta was not for the incoming president, but he had no anchor to anchor his influence other than the authority of state, which he was now losing by law because his candidate and himself, his term was over and his candidate had lost. But imagine a scenario where the Mount Kenya region, the Kikuyu voter was with President Uhuru Kenyatta. And here is President William Ruto has won the election, coming with completely a different constituency in. That influence alone would have made life very difficult for the incoming President William Ruto. That is why I thought it is necessary that we have some of these things that ought to happen and must happen for transition to be smooth, to be anchored in proper law, so that even if somebody tries to be mischievous, the law keeps on taking effect as we proceed. And that is what saved the Joe Biden, because there were laws that were proper, that were taking place, even if the outgoing president was being mischievous. So what we need to have in this new law, which I guess is in there, is if the president can be sworn in, it doesn't matter whether the outgoing president is mischievous and is not willing to hand over. There is nothing to hand over, but there is something to take over. So this something to take over is what is taken over through the swearing in period. The rest will take place when the outgoing has gone and the incoming has come.
Yeah, actually, there's a provision that it matters not whether the outgoing president attends. The new president.
You cure a mischief when you see it popping up its nose, when you see its ugly head coming. So I think if this would cure that mischief that I also feared during the last transition, then I think it's a good law. It needs to be there. And I leave the details to Noordean.
Yeah, again, one would suggest that maybe the county...
Not that it is written in a language I would not understand. you know, one time when I was chair, I used to have somebody in my board who used to remind me, each time I disagree with him on an issue, he would remind me that he's a lawyer. So I told him, you know, my brother, the law is written in English. Yeah. So don't even tell me that. We can all read it and understand it. And that is why, hata kama wewe ni mama mboga, you break the law. You will not tell them, oh, you know, I was not a lawyer, I didn't understand it. There's nothing like that in law.
The law is very clear, but we can never ascertain your eyesight. Meaning, interpretation is key to the law.
But is it the case that the law is clear?
Let me tell you, the interpretation of the law is not a preserve of lawyers only. Because you will get two lawyers interpreting the same law differently.
No, that's one.
The lawyers or judges?
I can explain that. No, judges are the arbiters. I can explain that. A scenario where two lawyers differ on interpretation.
It is always the scenario in every court.
The reason behind it is that where is your bread buttered? Depends on your client.
You know, Noordean, I like your honesty.
You know, the Americans have got a saying which you cannot complete, that money talks.
Yeah.
And XYZ works.
Yeah.
So obviously, you pays the piper.
Calls the tune.
Calls the tune.
Of course.
That is why the law is not clear.
No, the law is very clear, and that is why you see the court always, out of two opinions, the court sides with one. One that the court agrees to, that this is right, this has followed the spirit and letter of the law, you know, at the end of the day. That's why I'm saying, you see, when two lawyers differ, that's why that's why every criminal, that quote unquote is a criminal, has a defense. You know the law says everyone is entitled to representation, even the devil himself. Now,
talking about this act before Kevin comes in, shouldn't we also have the one for county governments amended to capture the essence of this for governors?
Actually, the assumption of office for governors is always a report. I have done a few issues around that. The issues that follow that report, it carries things like pending bills. So you find there are some people whose pending bills are never incorporated in the pending bills. So a new governor assumes office, and then someone is seeking to be paid. They were never paid 5, 6, 10 years. And they're told, oh, by the way, in this report that we have, your pending bill is missing. So the question is there a sensitization around, oh, we are making a report. Anyone who has a pending bill, kindly bring your bill. But I do believe that anyone that's either is contracted by county government, see, they send their, if it's a lawyer, it's a fee note. If it's a supplier, someone, they send their DRNs. So I do believe, yes, we need to make this thing holistic so that we don't have a situation where once there's an assumption of office, there's a loophole. Even in the members of parliament, if these people, they assume office, for example, a new MP comes in, there are no reports as to, you've seen the Auditor General's reports, that some documentations are missing in the CDF. Yeah. So we need, any single time there's an election, there's a change in office. Of course, leave your office well-prepared, documentations, so that you don't give the other person that comes in a Herculean task of 6, 7, 8 months down the line, still looking for documentation.
Still planning curve.
Yes, and I do believe that, like as he rightfully says, it's not fair for someone to assume office as a president and then you have to start from scratch. You don't know what is going on. Unless the person who was leaving had an intention of making you either fail or was concealing something. And I do believe this is trying to cure that. I just hope it cures it very fast. And we have like 2 years to get cured.
Well, yeah. Well, again, I hope that when it comes to, it's going to be at the National Assembly, that you'll have an opportunity to participate in the public participation. Yeah. Kevin?
Yes.
No, I saw you taking notes furiously. I thought you had a point.
I was taking notes on when you said that even the county government should have a similar bill. But the hullabaloo around taking over in county governments is normally not as serious as the one for the national government. But when that came up, you also had asked me earlier to prepare something controversial that I would have to say that.
Yeah, at a later stage. Now,
so I was taking notes on that because mine is related to that. So it popped up my mind on something that I would have to
let the cat remain in the bag for a while.
I do believe that sometimes we forget that we have county governments, and county governments are part and parcel of governance in this country. So, we focus up there most of the time. And we end up forgetting that this county government, we were told that Nairobi is going to work. Man, Nairobi is in deep. The dimples are from the cheeks, and now we have dimples on the roads. Things are not working in Nairobi, and those are questions people need to ask. But when you look at, for example, the county assemblies that we have, we elect MCAs who end up there forgetting their roles. And they always fight the county governors for this thing called World Development Fund. Anywhere there's a county government and the county assembly and the governor in good books, those people have a World Development Fund. Where there's a crisis like what was happening in Meru, she had refused to give them that fund. That is why they had these issues from the get-go.
So the fund is created at the pleasure of the governor?
Yes. And so this, to give the governor ease. And sometimes there are allegations. Again, there are allegations that most of the times these finance bills that are passed by the county governments, MCAs sometimes allegedly ask for something. Otherwise, they don't pass it. Remember, there was an instance in Wajir, there was a time the county assembly was in shambles because apparently, I don't know if it's true, apparently the MCs wanted something. So if that is the way we are going to do things, then how are we fighting corruption? We just can't be fighting corruption at the apex there and then forgetting down here where services are meant to be devolved.
Would you be clear when you say something? What do you mean?
Something. Oh, there's a bribe, of course.
Okay.
Those are the allegations, because we need to sort out that as well. People forget that in as much as we care about the governor and the presidency, the most important vote that we have is at the county assembly and at parliament. If those two houses have people of integrity and people who are focused, believe you me, any president that goes against the constitution will be impeached. Any governor that does things that are illegal will be impeached. And not these political impeachments that we see.
How would you describe the capacity of, number one, governors and members of the county assembly?
Most governors don't know what they're doing. Most of them are there to make money. If we were to do an audit of most governors, actually, if you were to do an audit of the first-term governors, that who went into office in 2013, you'd be shocked what they owned when they went in and what they have right now. 10 years, you'd see someone left office with nothing to show. Nothing to show. Funds are being devolved. There's nothing to show. If you ask them, and some will say, oh, since independence we've been marginalized. You're talking about marginalization post-Constitution 2010. It doesn't make sense. So we need to hold them at the same standard we hold the president. Because we can't put the standard of the president so high and we forget these county governors. So the same way we take the presidency to a serious standard, we need also to check the governors, because they also are part and parcel of governance. They are like us, they see themselves like a small president. So let us see what you are doing, because they get funds. Every day they threaten that, we'll shut down county governments because money has not been dispersed. Money is sent to you. So many people have been contracted by county governments, and they've been auctioned because they've not been paid after delivered services. If you look at some of like Mombasa, Machakos, when those governors left office in 2022, the serious outstanding pending bills they left leaves questions. You're like, what were you doing? Even Nairobi here, we were told NMS left some serious pending bills. So you ask yourself a question. In as much as we check the national, we should also scrutinize the county governments, also the MPs who have a CDF. We have seen the reports from the Auditor General's report. People who claim, I used 10 million shillings for a swimming pool. A swimming pool in a semi-arid area. People don't have water. It doesn't make sense. And without any documentation. That's why I say when we're looking at corruption in the judiciary, we look at it holistically, not just the judiciary. Because if you solve the judiciary, but the executive and the National Assembly are still corrupt, if they are, that means the same corruption will spill over back. So whoever comes in will still be tainted. So to me, that is what I believe. We need, as citizens, one, it comes back to you, who do you vote for? Because if you ask one of the people, you voted for an MCA, 2 years down the line, will disappear. And if you ask the 5 years down the line, which law have you passed? What have you been doing for me? They know nothing. Sad reality. And we need to change that. And that is why you see, until today, the other day, the other meeting, I think it was at KCC, CAF, until today they're still crying for grants, car grants, they want those things that MPs have. And that's why I keep saying this car grant thing needs to disappear. Why are you buying you a kind of paid a salary?
Now, Kevin Owidi.
Yes, sir.
A few days ago, a group from Sudan called RSF had a meeting in Nairobi, and it created a lot of issues, and people started asking questions, talking about Nairobi diplomacy. There's a good part of Kenyans who say that part of the reason why Mr. Raila Odinga lost in Addis is because of diplomatic blunders. Never mind that when they say that, they forget about the Berlin conference. And you remember, Noordean probably, by then you were a very young person, but there was something called the Berlin conference,
yes,
where the white men divided Africa. Yes. So there's Francophony, there's Anglophone, yes, Lusophone, and then the issues of religion. And obviously, those are things that Mr. Raila Odinga would not be able to, they're outside his control. So that when you have an election at the Africa Union, East Africa almost always gets disadvantaged. English-speaking East Africa almost always gets disadvantaged. Because the last time Africa Union head came from this part of the world, when it was OAU, was Mohamed Salim from Tanzania. Although, again, we had Dlamini Zuma from South Africa. But if you look at absolute figures, it means that East Africa, English-speaking East Africa, may never secure that position. So people have been saying that is the Nairobi diplomacy facing a challenge?
Even before I get to that Nairobi diplomacy, let's go back to the elections that we had in the last, in AUC. When you are going for an election, you must get a discriminating, dividing line that you are going to use to separate your voters from your opponent's voters. That happens many times. You remember during the last general election, there were the hustlers versus them.
Dynasty.
Yes. So there was a line that was drawn. And if your line is drawn such that you have the majority, your chances of winning becomes very high. In the AUC elections, the dividing lines were either lingual, Anglophone versus Francophone, or they were regional, Central, East, West, and South, or they were religious, Christianity and Islam. They could have also even been economic. But there was one that has never been tried and tested. Race, or rather, let me say, skin color. That is the only one that would have given East Africa an advantage. Because even in East Africa, all the way to South Africa, we have a few francophones. And we have religion mixed. But in all of them, Kenya was outnumbered, whether it was religion, whether it was lingual, whether it was economic. The only thing that would have taken them somewhere was that skin color, which they were too embarrassed to use. But let me tell you.
Who was embarrassed?
Maybe our campaigners. But let me tell you, campaigns and elections are a life and death thing. You can use any tool you have around. Community and clan mobilization is the most powerful tool in galvanizing people to follow a certain cause. That is why you have seen Rigiji trying to galvanize his community, however much you ridicule him for being tribal and such things. That is how you see the Luo were united behind Raila Odinga. That is community and clan mobilization. Sometimes it even works without you invoking it. But when the people are unable to see it by themselves, you can invoke it publicly or privately, because people largely vote on emotions. These things called democracy is a fallacy. This is a place where you look for somebody who do not understand even what is going on is going to vote. Save for this one of AUC, where we have largely elitist presidents voting. But majority of elections, you get Mama Mboga, he doesn't even know what the person she's electing is going to do for him, but he has to make a decision. She may even make a decision by the form of dressing, or the clan one comes from, or the car one drives, or what the person once gave her, without knowing what is this person I'm electing going to do for me. That is why we have some counties in this country where the governor determines the election of every MCA. And you're still expecting this MCA to go and oversight that governor.
It's impossible.
Many of them even think the governor is their boss. And the governor wakes one morning and says, so-and-so has been leader of majority, we are going to remove him, and says, take somebody else takes back. Like in Oma Bay, the governor decides that the speaker has to go, and the speaker goes. In fact, he doesn't even wait to be impeached.
Who is the Oma Bay governor?
The Oma Bay governor is Madam Gladys Wanga.
That's the national chair of ODM.
That is the national chair of ODM, and she determined majority of those who are elected into that assembly. So, in such case, you cannot even get a single MCA even imagining that the governor should be censured, let alone impeached. So this is where the democracy becomes a fallacy. It was even worse, and it is getting bad, because the many people who are elected in such places, their election sometimes is determined by one person. The people had largely surrendered their voting rights to one person. Now it is even becoming very, very bad, because the governors are now also determining who becomes an MCA. And this is the very person you want to go and oversight him. That is why you see Rigiji talks the way he does. Instead of blaming the JSC for the impending impeachment of the CJ, he's taking it to the president's foot. He knows the president doesn't sit there, because in his head, the boss is supposed to influence the juniors. And that is, we are getting all wrong. Then we don't need democracy. Then he can take those numbers of his to hell, because they don't work. If we are in a true democracy, then the government organs, the state organs that we have to do certain things, must be led to do them. The independent bodies must do their work independently, without interference from the executive. And that is what he should be campaigning for now. He should be campaigning that JAC becomes neutral and becomes non-partisan. He should be campaigning that the police do their job. He should be campaigning that parliament does its work. But for him, whatever parliament does, he blames it on the president. Whenever JES is going to do, he blames it on the president. Whatever the police service, which is independent, is going to do, he blames it on the president. And that tells you that even him, when he becomes president, he will believe he should control these bodies the way he had believed someone else was doing. And I think that is why I say he needs to be stopped in time, so that that line he's taking is stopped. Otherwise, we will be going back to the very places we came from. It is very annoying, Mokua, to hear people as old as Kalonzo Musyoka are still talking about liberation. Liberating Kenya from who? From a person they elected by themselves and sworn in and cheered and celebrated in the streets. The same way they elected such a person in daylight, cheered and celebrated in the streets, is the same way they can vote him out. So this language of liberation is only done where the person in power is unremovable by any civil means.
But I understand Martha Karua is renaming a political party to People's Liberation Party. You would have an issue with that?
I have liberating us from what? We had already liberated ourselves from the colonial powers. Okay, we could have largely accepted to some extent that removing ourselves from the Moi hegemony was also some sort of liberation, because there was no clear democracy that people would go and vote the people they want. But today, the people have the vote in their hands. They can vote a person they think they don't like. So this language of liberation by these people must be stopped. But unfortunately, so many voters in Kenya think that liberation is a serious word. It's a magic word. It's a catchword that when used, the person using it means well to the country. He doesn't mean well. There are just some people he doesn't like. He wants to get out.
Now, talking about ODM and elections, observers have said that for the very first time, Honorable Raila Odinga, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, actually accepted the election defeat and conceded, and they said that it deserves a pat on the back. Noordean, what should you say about that?
Please, Mokua, before you let Noordean talk about that matter, you tell it to me and then you ask him to respond to it.
No, go ahead and respond.
First of all,
Let him go ahead.
Raila Odinga has always accepted all electoral losses. The drama that you see thereafter is meant to keep his political base in the box in which they have been. But officially, he has accepted all those losses. That is what you must know. Noordean.
I do believe that, you see, the easiest thing for him whenever he never agrees, he goes to the Supreme Court with a load of, in a canter. There's no Supreme Court there. And then also...
What is a canter for people?
A canter of you can't tell a lorry. Boxing and exhibit. Hey, like, you know, we've seen things in this country. So there was no place to take that canter. And then the other thing is, there was no server to be opened. So the mandamano can't be called. And then the other thing...
That is AUC?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the other thing, how do you call for mandamano for your supporters to go to AUC? Now on a passport wengine. Itakuwa ngumu.
No, but I took around him, we just walk across the road.
Sasa itakuwa ngumu. But at the end of the day, the last time I was here, I told you, I wish him to get whatever he deserves. So if that's
so you think he got what he
that
deserves?
Is what God believes he deserves, yes, he deserves that, and we move on. It's good that you know. If you ask me, Raila hasn't lost anything. He's not the loser in that contest. The loser is the one who sponsored him. He hasn't lost anything because now he comes back home. He tells Anyang' Nyong'o, boss, keep left, give me my party, and he starts marching towards rebranding his party. And the most interesting about his party is that senior leaders in the party are speaking one things, and you have some other guys there who are seeing something different. So it's a very Raila kind of party. In like there's some confusion. You know, he thrives there, by the way. he thrives in that.
You know, Noordean, as a student of applied politics, I'll tell you that is a strategic confusion.
Exactly.
It's very deliberate.
Yes.
That we have them dancing to two different tunes.
Yes.
And as you approach 2027, he'll pick the tune which suits his best selfish interest.
And I keep telling people, there is no single day an SG in ODM will say the things Sifuna is saying without blessings. So, and there are those who will be told to say something totally different.
Aladwa.
Yes. So at the end of the day, both voices are his voices. It depends on where you meet him. He has two tables. There is a tables for those who are sycophants, a tables for those who are strategic in thinking. So I do believe that is what he's going to do. And also the noise gives him a bargaining chip. Because they're in this broad-based government. Now they have to bargain. The more the noise, the more mukate. When you open the slice, the more slices it takes. So at the end of the day,
crust.
Yeah, it is political. There's nothing that happens in politics by coincidence. It is political. That's why he has not come back. So I believe when he comes back, Baba, when you are away, it has to happen again. No, he's coming back. So we wait and see how.
After Dubai shopping spree.
After, lazima jiambie pole bana. At the end of the day. So I do believe that he didn't lose anything, him. He's back to his political party. He's back to what he loves doing. That is politics.
Yeah. Before we go to the last segment, and Kenya has been known as the regional, actually the capital city for peacemaking, for diplomacy. And to use an example, the South Sudan peace process was anchored in Nairobi. In Somalia, it was anchored in Nairobi. During President Museveni in Uganda, all our regional leaders come to Nairobi to celebrate a new beginning and open a new leaf. Would you say Kenyans were justified to make a noise when they saw RSF civilian leadership in Nairobi?
Yes, I would. That is a diplomatic blunder. And then it will cost us one way or another. We just wait and see how or when. And the statements from Sudan, you can see. Because at the end of the day, we know the intentions of RSF. They want to be seen as a parallel government. That is the intention at the end of the day. There's nothing peaceful about that.
Okay, would you say there's a legitimate government in Sudan?
It depends with where you look at it from. That is the thing. But at the end of the day, if you look at what they are doing there right now, I think they've turned the constitution from a civilian rule to a military rule. That's what they're trying to do. That I think it's already done or not. But you see, those are issues of foreign state. But the fact that we look like we are picking a side isn't a good view.
But when they come to Kenya and they do their thing, even you remember even President Tshisekedi, initially when he wanted to run, he made the declaration at a hotel in Nairobi. If they come to Kenya, they conduct their business without breaking the Kenyan constitution, without offending our acts of parliament. Should people rise up in arms?
Of course we should, because you see, these are two factions that are claiming to run the government of that country. These guys have Darfur, they have sections they have quote unquote conquered. They believe they are more or less under their control. It's like us hosting here M23 and saying Goma and whatever is now part of a different country, and we allow them to come up with something like that. It's a diplomatic goof, if you ask me. So at the end of the day, we don't sit from a very comfortable situation because we look like we are siding with one side, and that is what the government in Sudan is saying.
So are you looking at it from a legal perspective or from a purist perspective?
Both. Because at the end of the day, how do you determine a government in any place?
But have they broken any law when they come to Kenya?
That they haven't. But your intention of coming to, we cannot house. It's like, for example, you remember that criminal gang that was in Kenya, the one that was dismantled called Gaza or something. It's like it moves from Kenya here today, it lands in Tanzania, then they say, you know what, Mbogi ni Genji, we are now the government, and they are led to sign whatever they are signing. It doesn't look good, and that is part and parcel of what I'll go into my statement as we end, because at the end of the day, I do believe that how we run our foreign policy is quite sad, if you ask me.
Kevin.
You know, there are two protagonists in Sudan. And if one seeks to come to Kenya, and you fear that the other one would think you are partisan, if you deny this one's also the chance to come, they will also think you are supporting the other side. What Kenya can do is allow them to come, the other person also to come. In any case, if you have to listen to them, let them come, you listen to them. In fact, if I was the president, I would also call the other side to come here to Kenya, and then we listen to them, and then we say, this is what ought to be done. But I think what has happened in Sudan, we need to use it to learn political psychology and philosophy. We need to learn. Sudan was a very united country for a very long time. And the reason was simple. They had a common enemy within in the name of South Sudan. Immediately, South Sudan became an independent state. The North now had to find another enemy within themselves. And I can tell you for free, If those two protagonists share North Sudan into two, and now they have Sudan A and B, A will find war within A and B will find war within B. That is the nature of human beings. If they can't find a larger enemy outside themselves, they will find one within themselves. Very natural. There was a time I heard my clansmen saying now, oh, because we have failed to win every election every other year, tunanyanganywa, because they were made to believe wananyanganywa. Now we want to secede and have our state of Nyanza, which would have included Mokua. You know what I told them?
Which would have included?
You. You know what I told them? You are a people who are always looking for somebody to fight with. The moment the rest of Kenya will go their way, Nyanza will be divided either in North versus South, or Luos versus non-Luos. But assuming they were just Luos only, we would have North Nyanza versus South Nyanza. If you divide it along that line, even within South Nyanza, they will find war within themselves until it reaches houses of mothers. Sons of the first wife versus sons of the second wife. That is the human nature. Look at Somalia. Somalia, even though they are one tribe almost speaking one language, they still find conflict within themselves inter-clans.
Clans, yeah.
Similar to Rwanda. And even if you split them, they will still find conflict. This is a problem we have, not only in Africa, but it is more pronounced in Africa. So, what is happening in Sudan, we must learn it. And we must, at all costs, avoid it back here. By trying to silence this regional political basis, community political basis that people are forming. And then when they have formed them, they are selling hatred, like the one I heard the former DP was selling in Meru. Those ones, they may sell it now so that it helps them get back at their perceived enemies. But in the long run, it may put Kenya in a situation where if you hear somebody is talking a language that you don't like, you pull a knife or whatever it is. We can get there.
I've noticed that for the last couple of sessions, you really zoomed in on Rigiji.
Yes, because it's destroying Kenya. Mm-hmm. It's destroying Kenya. Actually, if he would sit back and say, look, Kenya is one country, I would have also loved to be the president of Kenya. Let a president elected for 5 years complete. Let's go to the elections if we choose not to elect him. Because in any case, there was a time Dalmas Otieno was doing peace in Sudan. And one time, when he used to come back, I used to talk to him about it because I used to love the way he would bring people who are largely protagonists onto a round table. And there was a man called Riek Machar. So he told me, you know what I told Riek Machar? Riek Machar, when you go to the bush, the minimum time you can take into the bush before you go anywhere near even taking a small part of the territory is 15 years. The only person who moved even a little bit faster was Museveni. But because he also joined existing. So forget about these fights. Like the crusade now Rigathi is doing now. The nearest he can come to using it to get power will be another 10 years. So you'd rather be at peace so that Kenyans work at peace, so that people campaign peacefully, and then we go to elections, the winner pops out, and then we have a good Kenya. But there's so much noise that we can't even develop the country.
As we come to the end of the show, Noordean, what's your unpopular opinion? And you know, these are segments where you are expected to go against the grain and provoke high-octane conversations.
My opinion is as simple as...
Unpopular opinion?
Yes, my opinion is as simple as the Kenya Kwanza administration is an incompetent administration. And I say that solely by looking at our foreign policy. Our foreign policy, kwa wale watu wa mtaa watasema, ni kama ile kuja tuongea hatuwezi kosana. It's like we believe we are too smart. You know, it's like having two girlfriends and you're lying to them at the same time that I'll marry both of you. So at the end of the day, I say this back in the day.
But is it not possible to marry two?
No, I'm saying, so you know you're lying to them. Back in the day, Manchester United, a team I love and support, used to call Manchester City the noisy neighbors. So now Kenya has become not noisy, but the nosy neighbor in Africa. In that we are trying to get involved in things that do not concern us, areas where we have been expressly told we do not want your assistance because you are partisan. And it screams of incompetence. And it showed itself in the AU elections, because we might say the AU elections was pegged on religion and Francophone. No, away from that, how we run our affairs as a country has been seen out there. And we were trying to export our political misbehavior to the other states in Africa, which wasn't going to happen. So if you look at the incompetence I'm talking about, I'll give you an example. SADC wrote a letter. And what does our PS do? Rubbishes the letter. And the way, the bravado and the arrogance, it came to pass. We lost the election. A few days ago, the same PS shares a deep fake on X. And then an apology that isn't an apology, he blames Kenyans for having deep fakes. Before you share out anything, I believe, Mokua, you will check through and say this is a deep fake or it's original. So incompetence in that the Kenya Kwanzaa administration has employed people because of being bosom buddies, or because of, we struggle in the trenches together, but most of them lack merit. I won't say all. Most of them lack merit. So the incompetence that we see, we have suffered, and it's now on a global scale. And that's why I told you, Raila Odinga did not lose the elections. The elections that happened in AU against Raila, the voting, was a vote of no confidence from the president's peers against him. In that, they do not subscribe to our way of doing things. You cannot be a country that abducts people, that incarcerates people and puts people in Kamnikado, and then go and seek the vote of someone, the president of Senegal, who has been incarcerated before. So how do you expect the same person to vote with you? It will never make sense. We do not understand certain things, And it had nothing to do with the candidature of Raila Odinga himself, but everything to do with our administration. And I have friends across the globe. The things they say about us, and that is why I cannot wait for this government to leave office, because the harm they have done to us, it will take us decades to correct. There was a time back in the day where people from Africa used to hate us because they said, in South Africa, we side with the oppressor during apartheid. We have gone back to those days where as a nosy neighbor, we were making too much noise without any substance. And incompetence is our cloth. I do pray and hope and believe, may God, as soon as possible, take us to 2027, so that this incompetent and unpopular government goes home. And I say that not because of hatred, but because I love my country, and because the people who run the affairs of this country are forgetting that this country is for Kenyans. And some of them are at the tail end of their lives. Those of us who are young have a lot to live for, and this is not how we want to be perceived across the globe.
Wow. You are youth, I understand you. But in the issue of blaming the loss of Raila Odinga on President William Ruto, we are getting it all wrong. Raila Odinga may have been a state candidate, a government candidate. So if Raila Odinga lost, Kenya has lost. Because some of the reasons you are forwarding that made Raila Odinga lose, are they the same reasons that made Amina Mohammed lose? No. So the same reasons that made Amina Mohammed lose are exactly the same reasons that made Raila Odinga lose. Not that the president may have done this or that. Some of the places the president found himself in, if any other president of Africa found himself in, he would have acted basically the same way. So the president must take responsibility without fearing that if he did things another way, then Raila Odinga would lose. So he did the right thing. But another thing that made Raila Odinga lose, which nobody seemed to be noticing, you remember when the voting began, Raila Odinga was at 22. And his closest opponent, I think, was 18. As it went on, he reduced. He went up one, then kept reducing. Because there were some people who went to Addis Ababa and annoyed everyone in that country, annoyed everyone in the corridors. And I think our people need to understand certain things. Human beings, naturally, they don't like people who are bragging. They don't like people who are celebrating even things they had to have. And then you go there singing Tawala, Africa, Tawala, and the election is still going on, and you expect people to vote for you. I think the people who went there also misbehaved. And I understand their misbehavior because 95% of them, I initially thought there were 75, 95% of them, honestly, deep inside their motherly hearts, did not want Raila Odinga to win because they did not want to lose somebody who would lift their hands when election comes. Leave it at that. Now, let's go back to my controversial opinion.
Unpopular opinion.
Generally, you know, my opinions are largely unpopular because the truth can never be popular. Number one is spending bills in county governments. We must enforce, if we don't have a law yet, that first in, first out. It is very unfortunate that a governor walks in, pays the people who did their projects last year and leaving those who have been waiting for their payments for 5 years because they don't know them, because they can't find them to give them kickbacks. We must protect Kenyans who do business with county governments. And it should be in law that you pay those who worked first. And another thing that needs to be added there, if you delay the payment for 5 years, you pay interest for those 5 years. Otherwise, you are collapsing somebody's business. Yet these county governments, whatever they provide to the people, they charge them penalties. To talk a hapo. And by the way, if we compare what we pending bills with the PFM Act, then you wonder why we even have pending bills. Why do we have pending bills? There was a time the governors were defending themselves that money from the exchequer was delaying. Then just last year, there was a time the payments and the money from the exchequer was up to date, yet there were still billions of pending bills. Why do we have pending bills in counties, even counties which have up to 1 billion in on-source revenue? Leave it at that. The other one, which I know has been controversial, but that is the way I see it. In this country, we devolved governments. That was a big mistake. We should have devolved resources. That is why CDF appears to perform better than devolution. Because in CDF, we have devolved the funds. In counties, we have devolved the government. The thieving engineers, the thieving accountants, the thieving procurement officers are now in every county as they were in the national government. So, if Kenyans would agree with me, we would go back, have a referendum, and remove this nonsense of governments in counties and devolve own real resources. We say, now to Migori, we are sending 12 billion annually. Kisumu, we are sending 16 billion annually. And we have a committee elected by the people who are going to preside over its use. But the officers who would implement those would come from the national government. So we don't pay 47 engineer roads when we can pay one and get the work done. Because you find a county that is receiving 10 billion annually as devolved funds cannot show you one project worth 50 million they have done. And finally, I also must say the county should be given a ceiling to what number of staff they can employ. For example, in Homa Bay, when Governor Owidi was there was 270 million for salaries. Now the salaries is 530 million. Where did these people come? And what are they doing that the other previous government wasn't doing? And finally, because let me not finish those unpopular opinions now, because you may want them another time.
You'll be running out of stock.
Democracy, as we have in these countries of ours, in which 3/4 of the population is politically literate, is a fallacy. Because that is why we have kingpins who capture whole communities who know nothing, but they say, when the kingpin has said this, that is correct. When he has said no, it is no. To an extent, which educated lawyers, educated accountants, educated teachers are now saying, once our kingpin has said left, we all go left. If he says right, we all go right. And he's always right, and if you doubt, refer to number one, he's always right. That nonsense needs to go. And that is why sometimes, when I last said that I think President William Ruto needs to be a benevolent dictator, people screamed at me. But I can understand where I'm coming from. I don't know if they do.
Now, some feedback here. A gentleman called Maina and another one called a lady by the name Anne of the two have indicated that for the first time you have prosecuted logic in the unpopular opinion. Probably you need to add more weight on that. And then Noordean, a gentleman, has indicated that while you say you're not interested, I mean, if you get an invitation to State House, you'll not make it. John says that if the invitation is for 8 o'clock in the morning, you'll be within the presence of a State House at 6 in the morning, waiting to be let in. Your final remarks.
First and foremost, as I rightfully said, and I repeat again, the visit will be of no impact to me and to Kenyans. So I'll humbly decline the visit. I would, of course, it will be of no essence. But let me just take a cue from what he said. He talked about the county governments. The county governments right now are in a tussle with the control of budget, who says that they should not offer bursaries. But they want to take her to court because they want to offer bursaries. You see, this issue of a governor with bursary, MC with bursary, MP with bursaries, G Senator with bursary.
Every elected leader.
For what reason? Why can't we just have an office for that? If that in itself will bring inequality, then let's make free education. The simplest reason is to make education free and accessible to everyone. Because these quote-unquote bursaries, if you read the Auditor General's report in CDF, you'll be shocked where they say the amount that is claimed goes to bursaries sometimes can't be accounted for. There are no documentations. They give out forms are never, they say forms are never returned. Some checks are written erroneously, intentionally. So why do we do the same things the same way? Why can't we just make education free? We should have built, by now we should have built on Kibaki. Let's subsidize their primary education because it wasn't entirely free. Build on it until to make ourselves, you see, like, for example, Cuba. You know, we like giving references, Singapore, blah, blah, blah. There's a story about Linacha Zikuji. If we can build from Cuba, for example, education is free up to university level. Why can't we look futuristic and plan that so that we remove this issue of governors are now going to court because they are told they can't offer bursaries? Is that the one thing that is so dear to you that you think you must go to court for?
And also, you know, Cuba has got a very superior healthcare infrastructure. But obviously, one would understand why the governors want to go to court over their bursary. It's
good you mentioned healthcare. The last time I was with him, he was saying how SHA is working. I think he would have a different view today, unless he still believes the same way. You know, as from tomorrow, teachers are going to see bad things, according to hospitals. So, again, incompetence of KK that we hope ends very soon. Nothing personal, just a Kenyan who is more or less patriotic and loves the country. And when I say things like this, I have no hatred for any single leader. I just call out BS when I see BS. And the worst thing is that this government comes at a very wrong time, yet so right. Because they are in a generation where when you say a lie, you're told it's a lie because people fact check you. If these things were said during our great-grandfather's time, you know, our great-grandfathers were promised roads, and we are still being promised roads to date, and healthcare, and water, and eat all.
But those are continuous processes.
But you see, they are never done. You see. So at the end of the day, I do believe that they need to wake up and realize that when you say something, people will fact check you.
Actually, talking about bursaries, it's unfortunate that elected leaders use bursaries as a political manipulation tool, which is really unacceptable. And you raise a very fundamental issue. Maybe we need a piece of legislation on how to regularize and structure bursaries or make education free, because these elected leaders have got an insatiable appetite for dishing money from their pockets. Even when you walk around the country, you see posters and they're claiming this project has been brought to you by a certain governor or by a certain MCA, but that is more as taxpayer resources.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that is really unacceptable. But Kevin, your closing remarks?
What I have to say in this country today, Kenya belongs to all of us. And if Kenya belongs to all of us, we must all have equal chances of governing this country. For some people to think that it is only them who can govern this country correctly, to an extent that they sell propaganda to the citizenry on a daily basis, is to take a risk that we may never recover from. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. That has been Fireside, the home of politics, policy, and policy. Thanks for your time. Asante sana.